I used to think I understood what kind of father I was. Not a perfect one, I never claimed that, but a good one. The kind who shows up, works overtime when needed, keeps the lights on and the family seated at the same table every Thanksgiving. That was the story I told myself for 30 years, the steady one. The one who made hard calls so no one else had to. Then my younger son slept with my older son's wife. And the hard call I made, the one that was supposed to hold everything together, became the last decision my oldest son ever let me make for him. His name is Blake. He was 32 when it happened. He had a wife named Audrey, a 5-year-old daughter named Nell, and a house in Columbus, Ohio, that he'd spent 4 years saving a down payment for. He was a structural engineer. He coached Nell's t-ball team on Saturday mornings. He called us every Sunday at noon. My younger son is Seth. He was 28. He'd had a different job every 8 months, and a different girlfriend every year, and a permanent explanation ready for why none of it was ever his fault. He was charming the way some people are charming. The kind that works until you start keeping score. I wish I could say the pattern was invisible. It wasn't. I just kept calling it something else. When Seth was 15, he stole $80 from Blake's dresser drawer. Blake had spent the whole summer cutting lawns in the neighborhood to save up for a used acoustic guitar. We found out. My wife Donna cried. Seth apologized and cried too. We told Blake not to make it a bigger deal than it needed to be because his brother already felt terrible. Blake never bought the guitar. I don't think I thought about that again until much later, when I had reason to think about everything. When Seth was 22 and lost his apartment, we asked Blake, like it was a question when really it was not, if Seth could stay with him for a few months. Blake said yes. 8 months later, Seth was still there, had thrown multiple parties that scratched the hardwood floors in Blake's living room, and had eaten through Blake's grocery budget. Without once offering to split the utility bill, when Blake finally told him it was time to go, Donna told Blake he was being harsh on his brother. I said, nothing, which meant I agreed with her. That was the world we built. That was the family we raised. I want to be clear about something. I am not telling you this to build sympathy for myself. I lost the right to your sympathy a long time ago. I'm telling you because I spent too many years pretending these things were separate. Seth's behavior, Blake's silence, the affair, all of it. They were not separate. They came from the same place. My younger son spent 30 years learning that there were no real consequences for him. My older son spent 30 years learning that his pain was always a little bit negotiable. I built both of those realities. I maintained them. And when everything collapsed, I was stunned, genuinely stunned, by the wreckage. As if I hadn't spent decades laying the foundation. Donna found out first. Audrey came to our house on a Tuesday afternoon, while Blake was at work. She sat down at our kitchen table and told us she was pregnant. My first instinct was happiness. Blake and Audrey already had Nell. Another baby felt like good news. Then Audrey said she wasn't sure the baby was Blake's. I remember the hum of the refrigerator. I remember the light coming through the window at the wrong angle. I asked her what she meant by that. She told me. Seth. 4 months. Donna covered her mouth with both hands. I sat very still for what felt like a long time. I should have called Blake right then. That is the clearest single fact I can give you about everything that happened. I should have picked up the phone, called my son, told him the truth, and let him make his own decisions about his own life. Instead, I called Seth. He was at our house within the hour. He denied it at first. Then he admitted it. He said it had only happened a few times. Then he said it had been ongoing. He cried. He said Audrey had come to him. Then he said he didn't know what he felt for her. Every version of the truth made him worse. And I sat across from him, at the same kitchen table, where Audrey had just been sitting, looking for a version of the story that made him salvageable. That was what I always did with Seth. I looked for the version where he could be forgiven, without it costing anyone too much. We told Seth to stay away from Audrey and give us time to figure things out. We told Audrey to get a quiet paternity test done through her OB without Blake knowing. We told ourselves we were being careful, thoughtful. That we needed more information before we disrupted everyone's lives. We told ourselves that protecting Nell from a chaotic situation was the responsible thing. Secrets don't protect anyone. They just delay the damage and add interest on top. Blake found out 6 weeks later. Not from us. He found an old tablet while cleaning out a storage closet in the basement. One Audrey hadn't used in years or so, he'd thought. He saw the messages. He came to our house that Thursday night. I remember it because I had the Reds game muted on the TV. And turned it off when I heard his truck pull into the driveway. He stood in the doorway of our living room, with his phone in both hands, holding it the way you hold something you want to throw through a wall. His face was pale, his jaw was set. He looked at Donna. Then he looked at me. Then he said, very quietly, "Did you know?" I hesitated. Less than 2 seconds. But Blake had spent 32 years reading my silences. And he was fluent. Something changed in his face. Not anger, not yet, something harder and more final than anger. How long, he said. It wasn't a question. Donna said, Blake, let's sit down and talk about this. How long have you known? I said 6 weeks. That was already catastrophic. I didn't mention that Audrey had come to us, not the other way around. I didn't mention that we'd called Seth before anyone else. I gave him the smallest true number available and held it out like it was an offering. He stood there absorbing it then. 6 weeks. I said, we didn't know how to tell you. He repeated it back slowly, like he was translating something from a foreign language. You didn't know how to tell me that my brother has been sleeping with my wife. Donna started explaining. She talked about Nell, about the family, about waiting for the test results before we caused damage that couldn't be undone. I heard myself agreeing with her as she spoke, the way I always agreed with her when I felt guilty and didn't know what else to do. Don't put Nell's name in this, Blake said. His voice was flat. I said, son. Don't. He closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, they were very tired. You had 6 weeks. You used them to protect him, again. That was when I said it. I still hear myself sometimes in quiet rooms, saying it. I said, Seth is still your brother. We're not defending what he did. But eventually, for Nell's sake and for everyone's sake, you're going to need to find a way to move forward. Move forward. Blake looked at me for a long time. I couldn't hold his gaze. I looked at the blank television screen instead. When I looked back, something in my son's face had closed. Permanently, though I didn't know that yet. He said, okay. Then he left. Then I thought the okay meant he was processing. That he needed a few days, maybe a week, before the shock wore down, enough to have a real conversation. I thought Nell would bring him back if nothing else did. That even if Blake was furious with us, he would never actually take our granddaughter away. I was wrong about all of it, in ways I still find stunning. By the following Monday, Blake had spoken with a family law attorney in Columbus. By Wednesday, he'd filed for divorce and for emergency temporary custody of Nell, with documented evidence, including the texts, the dates, the fact that Seth had been in their home while Nell slept upstairs, and the fact that Audrey had hidden a second phone for months. The judge granted it. Audrey was allowed supervised visitation. Seth was ordered to stay away from Nell pending a full hearing. Then Blake disappeared. Not to another neighborhood. Not to another part of Ohio. He moved completely and systematically, the way a person does when they have thought it through in advance. His house was listed within a week, and under contract within 3. His phone number went to a disconnected message. His email bounced. He'd resigned from his job before we thought to call. His friends answered us politely in ways that told us nothing, and conveyed everything. No forwarding address, no social media, no trail. He took Nell, sent. The last time I saw my granddaughter, she was standing beside Blake's truck in our driveway. She was 5 years old, and wearing her rain boots, the yellow ones with frogs on them. Even though it hadn't rained in over a week, she had a turtle-shaped backpack, and she was holding a stuffed animal she'd named Biscuit years ago. I came out the front door calling her name. She turned toward me smiling because she was 5. And she didn't understand what was happening. Blake stepped between us before I reached her. Not aggressively, just enough. Let me say goodbye to her, I said. She's confused enough right now. I'm her grandfather. He looked at me. His eyes were exhausted in a way I had never seen before, and I had seen my son through hard years. He said, and I was your son. I tried to reach his sleeve. He took 1 step back. I said, Blake, please don't take her from us. He said, you already took enough from me. He got in the truck. Nell waved at me through the passenger window because she was 5 and she thought we were saying regular goodbyes. I waved back. I didn't know what else to do. Then they were gone. For the first several months, Donna and I convinced ourselves it was temporary. That he needed time, that grief and betrayal made people do dramatic things. They eventually walked back. We called it his tantrum in private. And that tells you everything you need to know about how thoroughly we still did not understand what we had done to him. A man walks away from betrayal and from parents who chose to protect the person who betrayed him. And we called it a tantrum, because it was easier than calling it justified. Seth predictably came apart. He lost his job within 2 months and moved back home for a stretch. He drank more than was good for him. He spent a remarkable amount of energy explaining, in different configurations, why what had happened was the result of factors outside his control. Audrey, the timing, the circumstances, the way he'd been raised to be impulsive, the way nobody ever really understood him. Donna made him dinner. I loaned him money I knew we would never see again. We told ourselves we were supporting him through a hard time. We were doing what we'd always done. Managing Seth's Crisis. By managing Seth's crisis. While Blake's absence sat unanswered somewhere across the country. The only sign that my older son was still alive came once a year, on Nell's birthday. A card would arrive, no return address. Inside a printed photograph. Nothing written, just the image. The first year Nell was 6. She was standing at the edge of a creek holding a jar with something in it. A firefly or a small frog, I couldn't tell. She was laughing. The second year she was 7. And had a gap in her 2 front teeth. She was holding a ribbon from what looked like a school science fair. First place. The third year, she was 8. And wearing swim goggles pushed up on her forehead. She'd taken up competitive swimming. The fourth year was the one that broke something in me. Nell was 9. She was standing at the edge of a hiking trail somewhere. Mountains behind her, pine trees, clear sky. She was grinning at the camera. But what stopped me wasn't Nell. It was Blake standing beside her with his hand on her shoulder. He looked different, leaner, calmer. He was smiling, and not the careful managed expression I remembered from family holidays where he'd spent years subtly smoothing over Seth's behavior before it embarrassed everyone. A real smile. The kind that only lives on a face when none in the immediate environment is working against it. My son did not look like a man who was suffering. He looked like a man who had found solid ground and planted himself on it. I sat at the kitchen table and held that photograph until Donna came in and found me. She looked at it. We stayed quiet for a long time. Then she said the thing we'd both been avoiding for 4 years. We lost him. Not he'll come back when he calms down, not give it time, just we lost him. And for the first time, I had nothing to say against it. That winter I had a heart attack. Mild, the cardiologist said, which is a phrase that sounds wrong, but apparently means you walk out of the hospital on your own. I spent 3 days there and came to a recliner and a collection of medications and too much quiet. Lay there thinking about Blake at 14, saving all summer for a guitar he never got to buy. About Blake at 20, driving 3 hours on a Saturday to help us move furniture, while Seth had conveniently had other plans. About Blake at 26, letting his brother move into his apartment. About every holiday where Seth made everything about himself. And Blake sat across the table being polite, absorbing it. The way he always absorbed it, because we had taught him to. I had spent 30 years reading that steadiness as strength. What I had actually done was raise a man who learned early that his pain had a lower priority than everyone else's comfort. And I had called that love, and I had called it family, and I had handed it to him as an inheritance. Donna found Blake through a newspaper website. A small Colorado paper had run a photo feature on a youth swim program. Nell was in one of the pictures, older now, almost 10, standing beside a timing board at a meet. Her last name wasn't Harmon, which had been Blake's. It was something else. He'd changed both their names. I stared at that for a long time. My son had remade himself so completely that he'd given himself and his daughter a new name. That is not the action of a man waiting to be called back. I should have let it be. I know that. But regret is a specific kind of desperate. And it convinces you that your pain entitles you to reopen wounds that have been quietly closing without you. I found the swim program's community board. Blake was listed as a volunteer coach. There was a photograph of him kneeling beside a group of kids in swimsuits. His arm around Nell. He looked like someone who had turned a corner, and not looked back, not once. I wrote a letter. It took 11 drafts. The early versions explained too much. The later ones explained too little. In one version I mentioned Nell directly, then crossed the whole paragraph out because I understood, finally slowly, that asking for access to her would transform an apology into a transaction. What I eventually sent was as short and honest as I could make it. Blake, I failed you. Not just 6 years ago, and not only by staying silent for 6 weeks. I failed you your entire life by treating your steadiness as a resource, rather than something worth protecting. When Seth hurt you, I protected myself from the discomfort of holding him accountable. When he destroyed your marriage, I did it again. And when you stood in our living room needing exactly one thing, just one of us to say we were on your side, I told you to move forward instead. You owe me nothing. Not a reply, not forgiveness, not a phone call. I just needed you to know that I see it now. Your father. Sir. I mailed it to the swim program address, and waited. 3 months of nothing. Then Seth came to the house asking for help with a security deposit. He looked rough, thinner than he should have been, something worn out behind his eyes. He started justifying the ask before he even made it, the way he always had. As if he knew the request alone wouldn't be enough. I said no. He went still. I said, "We're not giving you money, Seth." "So Blake finally got to you," he said. The way he said Blake's name. Like his brother's absence was something Blake was inflicting on us out of spite, like some ongoing competitive move. Told me everything I needed to know about how much further Seth still had to travel. Donna said quietly, "Your brother didn't do anything to us, we did it to ourselves." Seth argued. He said Blake was being cruel, that family was supposed to stick together, that none of this would have happened if people hadn't overreacted. He said it loud in the same living room where Blake had once stood pale and still, holding his phone with both hands, asking us quietly if we had known. When Seth left, he slammed the door hard enough to knock a framed photo off the hallway wall. An old Christmas portrait, all four of us, maybe 15 years back. The glass cracked diagonally across Blake's face. I picked it up. Stood there for a moment. Then I took the photograph out of the broken frame, cut Blake's portion of the image out carefully, and put it in an envelope with the birthday photos he'd been sending us each year. It was a small thing, and it was too late, and I knew it. But it was the first time I chose to keep my son. Without keeping the lie of the family we'd pretended to be. 4 months after I mailed the letter, an envelope arrived. No return address. One sheet of paper in Blake's handwriting. "Dad, I got your letter. I believe you mean what you wrote. I also think you still don't fully understand what you're sorry for. You apologize for 6 weeks of silence. But the 6 weeks were only the most recent episode of something that had been in place since I was old enough to understand what was happening. You protected Seth because protecting Seth was easier than holding him accountable. You expected me to absorb whatever Seth couldn't handle, because I had always absorbed it before. When he destroyed my marriage, your first instinct was still to manage his fallout. Move forward, you said. Like what he did was weather, like I was supposed to walk through it and come out dry. That is why I left. Not for revenge. Because I finally understood that if Nell grew up watching me accept that kind of treatment, she would learn that this is what love looks like. I will not teach her that. Do not contact the swim program again. Do not try to find us. If I ever decide I want to speak with you, that will be my decision. Blake. I read it twice, then I folded it and set it on the kitchen table. Donna asked what it said. I handed it to her. She read it slowly. When she finished, she said, "He's right." I said, "I know." I expected more from myself in that moment. More defensiveness, more anger, some instinct to argue. What I felt instead was something like a door opening in a room that had been sealed so long I'd forgotten it existed. Somewhere in the following year, Seth found his own bottom. It came from an unexpected place. His son. He'd had a boy by then, Oliver, with a girlfriend. Asked him one day why Uncle Blake never came to visit. I know this because Seth told me about it himself, during one of the first honest conversations we ever managed. Oliver was 4 years old. He asked without cruelty, without strategy, the way young children ask things, just wanting to understand. Seth said, it wrecked him. He started therapy, not cleanly or quickly. Seth has never done anything cleanly, but he started, and something in him began slowly to go in the right direction. He asked me once for Blake's address. I said no. He got angry. Then he breathed through it and said okay. That was new. I held on to it. 2 years after Blake's letter, Nell's birthday envelope arrived as usual, but it was thicker than before. The photo showed Nell at a swim meet. Older, more serious, her body longer and stronger than the girl in the creek photo. She was standing on a starting block with her arms up. Blake was visible at the far end of the lane, grinning, and beside him stood a woman I'd never seen. Dark hair, warm eyes, one hand resting lightly on Blake's arm. On the back, Blake had written one sentence. Nell wanted to send this one herself. Not Blake wanted. Nell, my granddaughter, knew we existed. She knew enough to want us to see. I held that photograph for a long time. We learned the rest a few months later. Her name was Tara. She taught middle school science. Blake had remarried. The announcement was brief. A small local paper, a garden ceremony, Nell standing between them in a pale yellow dress, looking like the happiest person there. Donna said, I'm glad. She was crying when she said it. So was I. Our son had found someone. He had built something whole out of what we had broken. We had not been there for any of it, and that was on us. We were learning to hold that without trying to make it into something else. I had a second cardiac event the following year, smaller, another warning. When I came home from the hospital, I asked Donna to help me write one more letter. Not to ask for anything. Not to explain myself. I wrote it because I did not want to run out of time with things still unsaid. I told him. I know I treated your steadiness like a resource instead of something worth protecting. I know I saw how much you could absorb, and kept loading you up and calling it strength. I know I cannot undo any of it, but I watch what you built, and you built it without us and in spite of us, and I need you to know that I see it. You became a better father than I was. That took more than I ever gave you credit for. I'm not asking for anything. Better late than never, and I'm sorry I took so long. Dad. Blake replied in 10 days. The letter was short. Dad. Thank you for writing without asking for anything in return. I hope your health improves. I'm not ready for more than this. But I'm glad you're still here, Blake. I'm not ready for more than this. Not a door swinging open. But not a door locked from the inside either. Donna passed away the following spring. An aneurysm, sudden and quick. She was there one evening, and gone before the next morning. I called Seth first. Then I sat alone for an hour before I called the number. Blake had used to confirm he'd received that last letter. He answered. East? I said. Blake. A silence. Your mom died this morning. I heard him breathe in slowly. When he spoke, his voice was careful. I'm sorry, Dad. Just those words. But they were real. The service was small. Seth came with Oliver, who was 7 by then. Quiet, observant, with Seth's face and, I hoped, better judgment about how to use it. Near the end of the service I saw him. Blake, standing near the back of the chapel. Tara beside him. And Nell, 13 now, in a dark blue dress, holding her father's hand. She had his jaw and Donna's eyes and nobody else I could clearly identify in her face. Seth saw him too, went pale, took half a step toward the back. I shook my head very slightly. He sat back down. After the burial, Blake came to me. Tara and Nell stayed back at a distance. He said, You held it together. I said, I've had a long time to practice. We stood in silence for a moment. Then he said, Nell knows the broad strokes. She knows her mother hurt me. She knows Seth was involved. She knows you and Mom made choices that made it impossible for us to stay. Does she hate us? He considered that seriously before answering, which I was grateful for. He said no. But she doesn't know you. That was harder than hate would have been. Hate implies a connection. Not knowing someone means the thread was cut early enough that it never took. I asked if I could say hello to her. He looked at me for a moment. Then he nodded. I walked toward her slowly. She watched me come with careful eyes, not hostile, just assessing. The look of someone who had been raised to be thoughtful rather than simply trusting. I was grateful to Blake for that even as it ached. I said, Hi, Nell. She said hi. Then after a beat, I'm sorry about Grandma. Thank you, sweetheart. My voice cracked slightly on the last word. She kept every photo your dad sent. Every single one. Nell glanced at Blake. He gave a small nod. She looked back at me. She kept them? In an album. She looked at them all the time. Something shifted in her expression. Not warmth exactly, but curiosity. The wall didn't come down. But something opened in it. Just slightly, just enough. Blake put a hand on her shoulder. After she walked back to Tara, he turned to me. He reached into his coat and held out an envelope. She wrote this before we came. She wasn't sure she wanted to give it to you. Might still not be sure. I took it carefully. Should I open it now? Later. I looked at my son. Standing in the afternoon light, outside the cemetery, a little gray at his temples, more settled in himself than I had ever seen him. I had so many things I wanted to say, and 30 years of practice saying the wrong ones. I said, I'm proud of who you became. His jaw tightened. He looked toward the tree line. I should have said it when you were a boy. When you were doing everything right. And I was too busy cleaning up after your brother to notice any of it. You did not get the father you deserved, Blake. Not even close. But you became a better one anyway. He didn't answer for a long moment. Then he said quietly, Goodbye, Dad. He walked back to Tara and Nell. I watched the three of them cross the parking lot. Nell reaching up to say something to Tara, Tara laughing, Blake's hand moving to the small of Tara's back. A family, a real one, built out of everything he had survived. And everything we had cost him. And every year he had spent. Building it somewhere we could not reach. I did not follow, I did not call after him. That night, alone in a house that had never felt so large. I opened Nell's letter. Her handwriting was careful, a little uneven. The handwriting of someone who takes things seriously. Dear Grandpa. Dad said I could decide whether to write you or not. I don't remember much from when I was really little. I remember your house had a tire swing in the backyard. I remember Grandma made strawberry pie on Sundays. And she let me have 2 slices even when Dad said one was enough. I remember being confused when we left. Dad never said anything mean about you. He said adults make choices and some choices change families forever. I don't know if I want to visit. I don't know if Dad wants that either. But I wanted you to know that I'm okay. Dad is a good dad. I swim fast now. Maybe someday you can come watch. Nell. I read it until the words blurred. Then I held it against my chest the way I had held that birthday photograph 4 years ago, when I first understood that my son had built a life without him. Not a broken life, not a diminished one, but a full one, a good one that did not need us in it to keep running. She remembered the strawberry pie. She remembered the tire swing. She wanted me to know she swam fast now. That is not forgiveness. Forgiveness belongs to the person who was hurt, and it cannot be rushed, or requested, or inherited by a grandfather who barely got to know his granddaughter before he gave her father every reason to leave. But it was something. A small door, cracked open, letting in just enough light to see by. In the months after the funeral, Blake and I exchanged a few emails. Short ones, Careful ones. He told me Nell had qualified for a regional meet. I told him I was seeing a grief counselor, which surprised me almost as much as it probably surprised him. He said he was glad I wasn't alone. I told him Seth had been in therapy for a while now. Blake didn't respond to that part. I learned not to bring up Seth again. One afternoon, my counselor asked me what I wanted. Not what I hoped for, what I actually wanted. I started to say a relationship. The word any parent reaches for automatically. Then I stopped, because I recognized that wanting a relationship was still centering myself. I said the truer thing. I want him to never regret leaving. I don't know what comes next between me and Blake. I don't know if Nell will ever sit at my kitchen table and eat strawberry pie on a Sunday the way Donna used to make it. I don't know if the distance becomes something smaller over years, or stays exactly what it is now. Some of what was broken may not have a repaired version. I have made my peace with that, slowly, imperfectly, the way you make peace with anything you cannot change. What I know is this. My son protected his daughter from the same system that had been slowly consuming him for 30 years. He saw it clearly when I refused to. He got Nell out, and he built something whole and good and stable out of what we had broken. He did that without us, and in spite of us, and he did it well. I think about something he wrote in that first letter. You expected me to absorb whatever Seth couldn't handle. Because I had always absorbed it before. I thought that was how I raised a capable man. It was actually how I raised a man who had learned, very early, that his pain counted for less than everyone else's comfort. I handed him that understanding like it was an inheritance and called it strength, and called it family. If you are raising more than one child, hear me. The one who never asks for rescue needs you, just as much as the one who always does. The one who holds things together is not built differently. They are just quieter about how much it costs. And if you keep loading them up and calling it strength, one day they may take you at your word. They may decide they are done being strong for people who never once asked whether it was too much to carry. My son moved on. I told him to. He moved on from Audrey. He moved on from Seth. He moved on from us. And the quietest grief I live with now is not that he is gone. It is that I gave him every reason to go. And he was right to take it. If you ever get a letter with no return address, hold it carefully. Don't perform grief over it. Don't use it as an opening to demand more. Just hold it, and understand that the person who was hurt thought you were still worth a piece of paper and the effort of a stamp. Because they didn't have to.